Hey guys, so as promised, I'm going to start with NCERT class 12th biology as well simultaneously because I want you guys to cover class 11th and 12th as much as possible before your board exams if you're appearing in class 12th boards. Okay, so the very first chapter of NCERT class 12th is reproduction in organisms. So basically, what exactly is reproduction and how does it occur in plants and animals? We'll cover everything, right? So we will be covering it in two different videos, one for asexual and the other for sexual reproduction, right? So let's start with the asexual reproduction. So before that, as we know that any organism that survives on Earth or that lives on Earth can live only for a certain period of time, right? So the period from birth to the natural death of an organism is represented as what? It is represented as lifespan. Okay, so you always observe that different organisms have different lifespan, right? Like a rose has the plant rose as in has a lifespan of 5 to 7 years. Dogs can be seen to live for 10 to 13 years, and I'm talking about natural death, right? So there is difference on an average lifespan defined for each and every organisms, right? So in the same way, uh, basically reproduction is very important part of our life wherein we produce similar organisms so that we maintain the population of our own species, right? So that is how reproduction is defined. And reproduction is defined as a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones similar to itself. So basically, when we reproduce, we give r- birth or we give rise to young ones similar to ourselves, right? Now, based on number of participant, right? Remember, based on number of participants in the process of reproduction, it is divided into different types. And what happens is the offspring that we reproduce, they grow, mature, and turn to, and they basically in turn produce new offspring. So there is a cycle of birth, growth, and death. Of what? There is a cycle of birth, growth, and death, right? Okay, so reproduction, what it does basically, it enables the continuity of species generation of after generation, right? Now there is a large diversity in the biological world, and each and every organism has evolved its own mechanism to multiply, okay? And they produce offspring as per that. So the organism's habitat, so organism's habitat, its internal physiology, and there are very many factors like this which basically are collectively responsible for how it reproduces. Okay. Now, based on whether there is participation of one, as mentioned here, based on number of participant, there is there are different kind of reproduction processes. Okay. So when the offspring is produced by a single parent, remember that when the offspring is produced by a single parent with or without involvement of gamete formation, okay, then that case is known as asexual reproduction. Okay, then that is asexual reproduction. Now, when two parents of opposite sexes participate in reproductive process which involves fusion of male and female gamete, this is nothing but symbol of this is male and this is female gamete. So when two parents of opposite sexes participate in reproductive process which involves fusion of female and male gamete, then that is known as sexual reproduction. Guys, please remember that this unit is very important and you should remember all these definitions. Okay, so what we'll be covering today is asexual reproduction. So basically, in this method, in the method of asexual reproduction, single individual or single parent is capable of producing an offspring. Remember that single parent is capable of producing an offspring, and as a result, that offspring produced and are basically identical and exact copies of their parent. So, since the offspring that are produced are from a single individual, they are exact copies of their parent, and that is why they are termed as clone. Okay, and now some common amongst these are single-celled organisms and relatively simple organizations in plants and animals. Okay, so this is basically common where this is common among single-celled organisms, right? So this is common among either single-celled organisms or in plants and animals with relatively simple organization. For example, protists and monorans. Now, in the case of protists and monorans, the organism or the parent cell divides by mitosis, right? And it gives rise to new individuals. So basically, the parent cell divides into two and it gives rise to new individual, right? Now, here cell division is itself a mode of reproduction. So we can see that in the form of diagram as well. So here we have a parent cell, right? So this is the parent cell. We have a parent cell, and then you can see that this is basically the nucleus, and the nucleus divides into two first, and then there is a notch formed, and the cytoplasm as well divides into two, and this forms a bud. Then this bud detaches from the parent cell and forms a new individual, right? Again, in the case of the other diagram, basically, in the case of amoeba, the same thing happens, right? So this is the parent cell. This is the parent cell. Here is the nucleus. Like then the division of nucleus starts. Here you can see that the nucleus has divided into two. Then the cytoplasm as well divides, right? And it forms two daughter cells, right? So many single-celled organisms reproduce by binary fission, as seen in the case of amoeba. Remember, many single-celled organisms reproduce by binary fission, right? Now, what happens in binary fission? A cell divides into two halves and each rapidly grow into an adult. An example are amoeba and paramecium. Now, again, in the case of yeast, unequal division happens wherein small buds are produced that remain attached initially to parent cell and eventually it gets separated and mature into new yeast organisms. This as well we saw in the first diagram, right? It forms a bud which initially gets attached and later on detaches and forms a new individual. Now what happens is under unfavorable condition, usually what happens is amoeba withdraws its pseudopodia and secrete a three-layered hard covering or cyst around itself, and that is known as encystation. So what happens is when the conditions are not favorable for amoeba, what it does it makes a covering around itself and becomes a cyst. And again, when favorable conditions return, these encysted amoeba divides by multiple fission and they produce many minute amoeba, right? So the cyst wall then bursts out and spores are liberated in surrounding medium to grow up into many amoeba, which is known as sporulation. This phenomenon is known as sporulation. So basically, again, that is why we say that a lot of microorganisms live under harsh conditions as well in the form of cyst, and as soon as they get a favorable condition, they become active and they produce many organisms, and basically they spread out as spores, right? Now, members of kingdom fungi. Now let's see members of kingdom fungi and simple plants. So what happens is members of kingdom fungi and simple plants such as algae, you can say algae, right? They reproduce through special asexual reproductive structures. So how they reproduce? They reproduce through special asexual reproductive structures like zoospores, and we covered that. If you remember, we covered that in the chapter 4 of class 11th, right? And these zoospores usually are microscopic motile structures. They are microscopic motile structures. In the same way, there are several asexual reproductive structures, like we have conidia in penicillium, we have buds in hydra, we have gemmules in the case of sponges. So even here in the diagram, you can see these structures, right? So penicillium, they form conidia, which detaches and forms new organisms. Then you can see that zoospores are liberated. Many zoospores are formed and liberated in chlamydomonas. You have buds forming in hydra, and this bud detaches and forms a new organism. In the same way, in sponge, you have gemmules, which are liberated as spores and it forms new organisms, right? So, while in animals and other simple organisms, the term asexual is used, in plants, the term vegetative reproduction is used. Okay, so as in case of animals, it is asexual reproduction. In case of plants, what we say it as, it is vegetative reproduction that occurs. And vegetative propagation occurs like you have runner, rhizome, sucker, tuber, bulb, and these all are capable of giving rise to offsprings. Remember, then these all are capable of giving rise to a new offspring, and these structures are usually called as vegetative propagules. What are these called as? These are called as vegetative propagules. Now, again, in some organisms, say if the body breaks into distinct pieces, which is nothing but fragments. Each fragment grows into an adult capable of producing offspring, and that is the case in Hydra, wherein it is known as fragmentation. So here you saw, then in Hydra, the body breaks into distinct pieces, and it basically all these pieces are capable of growing into an adult and then hence producing different offsprings, right? So this is known as fragmentation. So there, here you can see that there are various ways of asexual reproduction in case of plants as well as animals. It's just that it happens in usually single cell or simple plants or animals. Okay, so it doesn't happen in very complex organisms of plants and animals. And what happens in such cases? In such cases, we have sexual reproduction. So basically, sexual reproduction, as we saw, it involves formation of male and female gametes, right? So formation of male and female gamete can either be by the same individual or by different individuals of opposite sexes. As we saw in class 11th, that an organism can be monoecious or dioecious. What does it mean? That an organism can have both the sexes or either of the sexes, male and female, right? So what we'll be doing is we'll be covering the entire sexual reproduction in the next video, and I hope you understood this video very well. If yes, please do like the video and start your preparation as soon as possible, and also help your friends and please share the video with them as well. Also, if you did not understand any such definition or a word stated, please leave a comment in the same video, or you can also message on the WhatsApp number given in the description of this video, right? And please do not forget to like the and subscribe the channel as well to get all the updates, guys. Okay, all the best for your preparation, guys. Bye bye.